Welcome back, everybody, to episode 118 of the Below Average Joe's MMA podcast. It's Friday. That means we're coming at you again with another MMA Weekend Preview. Dominic, how are you doing, my friend? I heard you're in need of a golf partner right now.
I'm in need of a golf partner. No, today, we record on Thursday, reached out to 6 gentlemen, and none of them could go. So now I'm here recording with you. I mean, that's a pretty good trade-off, I'll be honest. So, yeah, man, hopefully sometime next week I'll get to hit the links and make a fool of myself once again. But I'm happy to be back here in the studio discussing some fights, breaking down some big news that came out this week. It's going to be a fun one to kick off the weekend. But, Noah, how are you?
Doing great. You know, it's a little unfortunate I had to stay after work today. You love it when, okay, for people, I'm just going to explain this to give people some
Paint the
background.
Picture.
Yeah. My schedule is Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. You got a half-hour lunch in there as well. So don't you just love it when at 3 p.m. you're given this big assignment that's due by this 8 a.m. the next day?
Yeah.
And I'm just like, well, I guess that means that I'm staying over.
Right.
I mean, I'm working from home, so I'm not like,
That
I can't be too mad about it. And plus, since I'm an intern, I found out from previously I'm only allowed to work 40 hours a week. So that means I'll get off early tomorrow on Friday, which, that's nice.
The silver linings.
Yeah, of course. But nobody cares about my damn work schedule. They care about MMA, damn it.
This is true.
And we're supposed to preview the weekend for them. But before we do, we got to talk about some news that's happened this week. We have no fight announcements, but we start with the notorious Conor McGregor.
He's back in the headlines again.
Yep. He's speaking out really for the first time since his fight last Saturday. He's given a few different comments here and there, but the one we want to focus on here is where he talks about his injury, and not just the injury that took place in the octagon, the one that we all saw, the shin or ankle, whatever, breaking. But it's come out that Conor is saying that leading up to the fight, he had microfractures on said leg, and that is the reason that it broke. And the whole point of this comment is to diminish the value of Dustin Poirier's win and to, I guess, hype himself up for a potential rematch down the line. Now, Dominic, we already know how we feel about this because we've talked about it offline, but explain to the viewers why this is kind of a problematic viewpoint to take if you're Conor McGregor, and for his fans, even if you're a huge Conor McGregor fan, why you shouldn't take too much stock in what he's saying here. Yeah,
so, first we just rewind back to the first Nate Diaz fight where Conor did lose and was so humble in defeat and, gave all the props to Nate and how he wasn't prepared. And
he was given a lot of credit for doing that, too.
Yeah.
Everybody around MMA globe was giving him so much credit for that.
It was Dominic Cruz-esque after he lost to Cody Garbrandt. It really was. But ever since then, we get the losses to Habib. I'm going to say MMA related anyway. There was the loss to Floyd outside of the octagon where it was relatively well handled, but then said, come to MMA and blah, 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 which, whatever. But then he loses to Habib. We know how the fallout went with that fight. And, he was drinking up during the fight week and wasn't preparing fully in camp and wasn't mentally all there. Then we go to the first Dustin fight, and he was ready to box Pacquiao. He was doing boxing-focused training, was barely training MMA, and now we get this one. Now, again, could this be true? Yeah, maybe, but take it with a grain of salt because we've just seen things like this in the past from Conor. So either way, he was saying how, ask Dana White, ask the UFC, ask the doctors. We nearly had to cancel this fight. But I just have a hard time believing it was at least that serious. Because you got to think, if there's a microfracture in a leg and it was checked out by these doctors, would they have really let him go in there? I mean, I know it is Conor at the end of the day. It's big money, 1.8 million rumored to be pay-per-view buys, which is insane. But that seems like it would be a pretty serious injury, nevertheless, to go into a fight with. So if you're a Conor fan, take it with a grain of salt. I don't want to throw too much hate around, but I'm just saying we've had a couple instances in the past with some excuses post-fight once Conor loses. Maybe this is another one. Who knows?
My problem with this, and I'm going to build off of what you just said. Again, I don't want to say that, like, we can't say for sure. We don't know. Maybe this injury was happening as he was walking into the octagon and the lead up to the fight. Maybe the doctors really did check it out and he still pushed forward because, they don't want to cancel this fight or postpone it, whatever. Maybe that's all true. Even if it's all true, I still don't think you can put too much on these comments because people, I know, you guys know from when we've talked, me and Dom have never trained in MMA. However, we know just from being passionate viewers of the product that there's maybe 1-2% of fighters in the UFC or in MMA fights in general that when they walk in to the cage, to the ring, whatever, they're 100% on fight night. It never happens. Yeah. It never happens. That's a part of the game, as I'll call it. The game it's not just the fight itself, unfortunately. It's the lead up, the training, trying to prepare your body best without over preparing it.
For 8 to 12 weeks.
Which is kind of what this is an example of, is like an over preparation, I guess you would call it. A part of the game is the media on fight week, press conferences. You saw how much that helped Conor in his first Dustin Poirier fight and how it really helped him win the featherweight title against Aldo. I'm not saying that to say that his skills are why he won, but he was able to get his opponents compromised before the fight even started. Right. So this is all elements of the game, as I'm going to call it. It's just the fight game. It's all encompassing. And this is just an example of that. So when Conor's saying, and I get it, microfractures are pretty serious. But we know that, especially coming off of Chris Weidman's injury, how bad that one looked, and obviously Anderson Silva before him. Conor's didn't look as bad just because I think it was just more of a placement reason.
More so the landing rather than the kick.
But regardless, it was still a bad injury. I just don't put too much stock on these comments because nobody goes. I mean, I'm sure Dustin Poirier had injuries as he was walking in. Obviously, they might not have been as severe, but that's a chance you take. Maybe when Conor went in and fought Cowboy Cerrone, maybe Cowboy Cerrone had an injury that really hampered him, that he was considering dropping out of the fight, but didn't because he recognized the payday.
And you don't hear about it,
But you don't hear about it. Yeah. That's the problem. That's why I agree with you on your point that, we gave Conor a lot of credit back when he lost to Nate Diaz, and even to an extent when he lost to Floyd Mayweather in a boxing match. We gave him credit for the way he handled those losses. He took them in stride.
Humble in victory and defeat was always what he said.
He talked a big game, but if he was bested, he would give his opponent all the shine and all the credit. But really, the majority of his losses have not gone that way. Yeah. I mean, just look at these last couple. I mean, the Khabib one was really bad because we know all the bad blood with that matchup. But, afterwards, talking about, if there was no wrestling, what would have happened, which is such a just any argument that involves taking an aspect of MMA out of the sport, you lose me immediately. The second Poirier fight where he, as you said, talked about he was preparing for a Manny Pacquiao fight. He basically blamed the entire loss on the calf kicks, that was why he got dropped by the I believe it was the right hand.
The right hand, yeah.
Was because he was planting on that dead leg, as we called it. And then this fight, he's talking about this injury and talking about how he was injured before the fight. And that might be true, but it doesn't matter to me.
It does, all in all, still diminish your opponent's win, regardless, right?
And I just think it's the wrong thing to focus on here. I want to focus on his recovery. Yeah. I hope Conor McGregor recovers well. I hope he comes back if he wants to and can, have a great fight with another opponent. Or, I mean, even if they, for some reason, if timing works out and situational
And they do the quadrilogy.
Yeah, they do
saga.
The saga with Dustin. I mean, if it worked out that way, I'd be fine with it, I'm sure. But at the end of the day, man, that's what I want to focus on. I don't want to focus on if, who, what, where, why.
Yeah,
why
this fight is now over.
It's over. Dustin won. He won for the entire 5 minutes of that fight. It's done. I know you, sure, maybe if it goes to a second round, maybe Conor lands a good, clean shot and finishes that fight. But it didn't go that way.
Yeah.
His body did not hold up for him in a fight atmosphere. So he lost. I mean, that's just right. And I hate to be this way with Conor because I know what a big deal he is, how much he does for the sport. How many eyes he brings. We've noticed it in our own videos. Talking about Conor, there's always a big spike in talking about Conor McGregor. I'm sure this episode we're talking about Conor McGregor right now. Exactly. I'm sure you'll see a spike in this one. But so I hate to talk almost so negatively about him at times, but he's not making it easy.
Yeah, right.
I want to give him credit. And I've tried, and we've done it in the past. We've had entire episodes focused on Conor's achievements. And
I got a damn picture of him right there on the wall. It
doesn't give me
from haters. You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
that's not what we're coming off.
I said going into the third fight, Dustin and Conor, while Dustin may have outside of the octagon shown to maybe be a bit of a better person, there's just more question marks around Conor's, I guess, character. Yeah. But regardless, I looked at them both as I like them both the same as fighters.
As fighters, they're both incredible.
Yeah. So I didn't really have a dog in the fight. Even for you, I know you're a big Dustin Poirier fan.
Yeah.
But you still, it wasn't like you hate Conor McGregor.
Had Conor won, it would have hurt. But at the same time, it's oh well, we're in store for another huge Conor fight. He's going to get a title fight. That's a big deal. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it would have hurt for maybe for a day or two for you, but I know how you handle these moments. It's
thank you.
After a couple days, you give credit where credit's due, and you're okay, it's you're still happy that Conor would get that moment, whatever.
Yeah, and when Francis beat Stipe, for example.
Yep, that's a great example. One where that hurt me a little bit.
That always hits us hard. So.
But it's you recognize how good of a person Francis has shown to be, and how much he deserved that kind of moment. And you're you know what? Hard to be upset about it. So any other final thoughts on this? I mean, I'm kind of ready to be done with this
chapter.
Yeah,
I agree.
I still think it's worth talking about because this is kind of a last second addition to our episode. Was just because Conor just did it.
It came out today. Yeah.
But it just I saw it and I was man, at first I kind of just wrote it off. I do that, and I'm sure you do it too. We'll see these statements that we just don't agree with, or just what is this?
But then you see more and more talk about it.
Yeah, and I just kind of brush it off. But then today,
that's what I did.
I was going through my MMA Twitter and stuff, and even Instagram, and I just kept seeing people talk about this, and they're well, this adds validity to what he's saying. I'm man. It doesn't really matter if he had the injury. I don't care. So much of the focus has been on when did the injury happen? Did it happen on a check? Did it happen on the elbow?
No.
Did it happen just?
Did it just happen? Yeah.
Yeah. Was it stuff? Was it microfractures happening on the lead up to the fight? I don't really think it matters.
We'll never really know anyway.
So. I get why maybe people would want to know that, because if it was a check or the elbow, then maybe it's okay, well, Dustin, it was something Dustin did. Yeah. But to me, it doesn't matter. He's still the winner. You guys don't have to.
It's not going to change,
Yeah, I mean, he's the winner no matter what. It's done.
We got all heated to start this episode. Yeah, we got to bring it back.
Let's bring it back. You know what we just showed to Conor? We showed him
no love.
Speaking of no love.
What a segue that was.
Cody Garbrandt ain't got no love for these flyweights. Oh, my God. Our headlines kill me. Now,
we are good, yes.
Here's the story. And this one's actually a little it's a little cold off the presses at this point. This one,
it's surprising, but I like it. I gotta say.
It came out, I think.
He was doing a live thing with Brendan Schaub.
Well, yes, but Ali Abdelaziz and John Morgan were actually the first. Abdelaziz was tipped John Morgan this story, and that's kind of how it started. And then, yes, we'll get into Cody's comments on that fight companion with Brendan Schaub. This happened, though, around, I think it was fight night. I think it was last Saturday.
Yeah.
So because of that, it kind of came brushed under the rug because of all what was happening that day. But we want to talk about it because we like Cody Garbrandt.
Absolutely.
And obviously, he's had a rough go of things since he triumphantly won the bantamweight belt back in the end of 2016 over Dominic Cruz. Since then, he has won in 4. His one win being over Rafael Assunção, but he had back-to-back losses to TJ Dillashaw, lost to Pedro Munoz, and then most recently lost to Rob Font in a somewhat competitive but somewhat also one-sided decision loss. So coming off that loss, it felt like Cody's kind of stuck at bantamweight. He's a high-level fighter. He's like ranked 6th, I think, at bantamweight. But it just seems like maybe the top of the heap just might be a bit too much for him at this point in that division.
Yeah, even though he's still one of the bigger names.
Yes, agreed. So we have been and he's talked about this before. Obviously, he was scheduled to face Davison Figueiredo for the men's flyweight belt back at UFC 255 before having to pull out of that bout due to his ongoing COVID issues. So we kind of knew this might happen. Mm-hmm. But I really, after that Rob Font fight, I'm like, this needs to happen.
Yeah.
And he has made his intentions known that he is dropping to flyweight. And now that's kind of where the story for John Morgan, that's his part, and Ali Abdelaziz's part, that's kind of where they end.
Yeah.
That's all that really was said. However, Cody was on Brendan Schaub's podcast. I guess it was a fight companion. It was the first that Brendan's doing of these I forget what it's called. It's like Calabasas fight companion type thing.
They chill out, watch the fights.
Yeah, they had like Josh Thompson, guys like that on there. And on there, they started talking about Cody's next fight. And I believe someone, maybe Brendan.
I think it was Brendan, yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, someone asked him about Kai Kara France, and he was kind of like, yeah. And what's so funny, I think the follow-up question from Brendan was like, well, that's got to suck having to fight someone with the same name as your son.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, this is ridiculous. But regardless, so it looks like Cody Garbrandt is going to be dropping down to flyweight, and it looks like his first bout is going to be against Kai Kara France. Now, let's start with the move itself.
Okay.
I'm a big supporter of this.
I agree. I like it. Yeah.
I like it as long as he's committed to it. And we'll see, how does his body hold up cutting the extra 10 pounds?
Because he says he's a pretty small. So
he has looked outsized in his
even the Rob Font one, I couldn't believe.
The Rob Font one was pretty stark difference. Yeah. So he feels like a guy who can drop 10 more pounds. Yeah. But we'll see how his body holds up to that, how he looks when he actually does it. But as on the surface right now, I've been wrong about this when people moved weight classes. Alexander Gustafsson, the heavyweight. Things like that. I like this move.
Yeah,
and when I first heard it, I was like, okay. What I care more about is what's his first matchup going to be, because if they threw him right at Moreno right away,
I thought that's what they were going to do.
I was like, I don't know. And even if they gave him like an Askarov or a Figueiredo right away, I'm like,
that's tough.
That's a tough first matchup for a guy who really needs a win right now.
Yeah.
But instead, you go with a top 10 fighter, a really good fighter, but Kai Kara France, a guy known for his stand-up, not known for his wrestling.
Yeah.
So you kind of know maybe what kind of fight you're going to get here. But what do you think of the move? And then also, what do you think of this potential matchup?
I like the move to 125 simply because it does seem that Cody was at a bit of a stalemate at 135. So maybe this can freshen things up, but still maybe a future at 135 later. But maybe he'll look better here because, again, couldn't believe how outsized he was in that Rob Font fight. As soon as the fight started, I was so utterly surprised. So I'm curious to see how he'll perform. He's talked about this for a long time, which leads me to believe that 10 pounds extra shouldn't be a huge deal. We didn't get a timeline on this, but as for the fight itself with Kai Kara-France, it was very surprising, but I do like it. I think it's a fun fight for the fans. It's a good stylistic matchup. It's a fight that Kai can win and have the biggest name of his career on his resume. And for Cody, it's a great welcome fight to 125 where he can also get a win and stake his claim in the top 5 of that division. So it really is a very surprising matchup, but a damn near perfect matchup at the same time. I mean, I'm very excited when this will happen. Maybe in the fall, later on in the year, hopefully by the end of the year. So I do enjoy everything about this move down and the proposed fight with Kai Kara-France.
Yeah, see, we've really liked Kai Kara-France for a long time, and we've been, really in the lead up to his fight with Brandon Royval. That was a really tough one for me because I love Raw Dog, but then I love Kai Kara-France too. They're both very exciting fighters, and Kara-France has been around for a while at this point, but
still so young.
Yeah, still so young, still so competitive. He's kind of the flyweights version, and I know he's ranked quite a bit higher than this individual, but he reminds me of like a flyweight version of Drew Dober. Just a guy who's always in the fight, but he's been on the wrong side of a few losses. He's had some tough decision losses. He got stopped a couple times. He's not had a clean run, but he's been competitive and he's been in very high level, exciting fights. So for him here, the thing about it is his name is just not big.
Right.
He's a flyweight. He's not been really in his biggest fight is that loss to Brandon Royval, but that was on the main card of UFC 252. But
fight of the night, at least.
It was fight of the night, which is probably the reason why people even remember it. If it wasn't for that fight might have been kind of written off. Yeah. So what I like about this is it's going to give Kara-France a big placement on a card. Cody being a big name, whether this is a co-main of a pay-per-view or a featured bout on a pay-per-view, or a potentially like a fight night headliner. I totally think you could do either one or any of those 3 options I just said, or either way, there's going to be a lot of eyes, more than probably have ever been on Kara-France before.
Exactly.
For this bout. So I like that if he's able to pick up a win or just even have a great fight.
He gets a big rub.
He gets a big rub for him. For Cody, this is the appropriate step back, even in a weight class move that he needs right now. This is as good as Kai Kara-France is. I do think at this point, even though it's different because he's in a different weight class, I think it is an appropriate step back from guys like Rob Font, Pedro Munoz. Yeah. So it'll really show maybe where Cody kind of falls into this division.
I agree.
What worries me is if Kara-France comes in there and beats Cody Garbrandt, no matter how competitive the fight is. I worry
that's a real tough spot.
It is a tough spot, but I just worry Cody's going to go right back to bantamweight, be like, oh, well, that failed. I want to see him committed to this move for at least a couple fights.
I agree.
But looking forward to it. Now let's move on to UFC 266.
Out of nowhere. Just
out of
boom.
Yeah. Things just got interesting. Yeah. So we got our 2 title fights and our 5-round featured bout. That's right. Second time, baby. All of those are official for UFC 266. We've already talked about a couple of these, but we're just going to talk about it again because it all got announced together. It's official together. Might as well just put it all together. Yeah. So our main event of UFC 266 is for the men's featherweight title. Alexander Volkanovski takes on Brian Ortega. The Ultimate Fighter coaches clash at UFC 266.
Long awaited.
Co-main event. This one came out of nowhere.
Yeah, it did.
The women's flyweight titles on the line as Valentina Shevchenko goes up against the deserving title challenger and Lauren Murphy. And our 5-round feature.
Here it is.
It's a Diaz again.
But the other one.
It's Nicholas Diaz. And he's going up against Robbie Lawler in their second matchup 17 years after their first one.
We were 6 years old. Yes.
So, where to start here? Let's start with our title fights. I actually think that might be the lesser
Right.
headlines here, which is kind of crazy. I think we kind of knew Volkanovski Ortega was going to be booked for this card or somewhere around here. I'm glad to see they're getting a main event spot. I thought for a while, and I could be wrong, but I thought for a while people were putting this fight as a co-main under Blachowicz-Teixeira.
From what I've seen, it looks like that one got bumped to the October pay-per-view.
Right. So I couldn't remember if that was originally supposed to be September or I was like in my head, I'm like, did I miss?
I got so confused.
But I'm like, I thought I could have swore I remember Blachowicz-Teixeira being above that fight. But I'm glad to see that this is getting a main event slot because I think
it deserves it.
It's one of the most high-level fights you can make at featherweight, and I think it's going to be a really fun bout. And you have a whole season of The Ultimate Fighter to really hype it up. Why not put it as a main event, you know?
Yeah.
So no questions there, right? Great bout.
Right. Yes.
Co-main event. Shevchenko Murphy. And
the queen.
I've fallen into this trap, but just because, and I probably even have slipped up and said something of sorts on the podcast. So I'm gonna course correct my previous statements now.
Right the wrongs.
Just because someone on paper doesn't have a shot in hell does not mean that they shouldn't get a title shot.
Right.
And Lauren Murphy has earned her right to fight Valentina Shevchenko.
Yes.
And obviously, for the majority of us, do we think she has much of a chance? No.
But we think that about everybody that fights Valentina.
I mean, I'm sure if we were doing this podcast back when Ronda Rousey was fighting Holly Holm,
right,
we would have said something similar.
Even though
in retrospect, now you go back and you're like, okay, well, Holly Holm, Gold Glove champion of boxing.
Yeah.
But my point is that we don't think she has much of a chance here, but it doesn't mean she doesn't deserve to have a chance to show us otherwise.
Exactly.
So any other thoughts on that fight? Because it kind of came out of nowhere.
It did come out of nowhere, but it's the one I always thought was going to happen. It's the rightful number one contender against the reigning bullet, Valentina Shevchenko. Nevertheless, I'm always excited to see her fight regardless of who the opponent is.
Right. Now for our 5-round feature bout.
Don't you just love saying it?
I know. I'm glad I'm finally catching on to that. There for a while, you had to keep picking me up. I kept going 5-round.
Something or another.
Yeah.
If your last name is Diaz, you're getting a 5-round bout in the UFC now.
Yeah. So that's the rules. Yeah, exactly. What even adds to kind of the zaniness, I guess, of this whole announcement is that before, I guess, they finalized the top 3 bouts here, the first announcement of the day was Nick Diaz, Robbie Lawler, officially a 5-round co-main event for UFC 266. And then like an hour later, all of a sudden they were like, oh, wait, actually we have a second title bout on there.
Yeah, here's the whole card.
So that kind of added to some zaniness for this announcement. But regardless, what do you think of this bout? Because personally,
you love it. Well, the stylistic fight, yeah.
I love the fight. I do. I think for both guys, this makes sense. And now, a lot of people were like, I kind of think that a lot of people are disrespecting Robbie without realizing it.
Yeah.
I understand Robbie's last few performances have not been the most inspiring. He hasn't looked the best. I completely understand that. But Nick Diaz hasn't fought in 7 years at this point.
Something like that.
So to sit there and just everybody's like assuming that these two are at the same level right now. And I mean, it's just I just think it's slightly disrespectful to Robbie because on paper, Robbie should be a big favorite in this fight, in my opinion, which I think a lot of people are going to disagree with. But you have a guy who hasn't fought in 7 years, he was great when he left.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. He's the man.
Yeah.
But you haven't fought in 7 years.
It's a long time.
A guy who has been active that entire time, even if now he's kind of
has been a champion in that time.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. So I feel like on paper, Robbie should be a pretty big favorite here. But if you're going to have Nick Diaz come back and fight, it needs to be someone who has a name to him, who is willing to engage in a very fun kind of stylistic, fight. And I think this is the matchup. I don't think there's any more perfect of a matchup for Nick Diaz at this point in his career. I know Robbie has been a little gun shy and some of his previous outings. I just don't see that happening here.
No, not at all.
Now tell me, again, I already posed the question what your thoughts are on this fight, but I'm going to go ahead and add a second question on top of that. Tell me, is there anything based off of what I just said? Am I getting too excited for this fight? Should I be reserving my expectations considering where these two are at in their careers?
No, I mean, well, I love the fight. And I don't think you're getting overexcited. I think it's a great fight. It's a great matchup. This is the one you've been calling for ever since it was rumored of Nick to return. And you love Robbie Lawler, so you're just checking the boxes here. Two guys that love to go in and be in fun fights. The fact that it is a rematch, 17 years in the making. You look at the paths that each man went on since that first fight. It's just craziness. So I love everything about this. It does make sense. It's a perfect welcome back for Diaz, a perfect fight for Robbie to still stay relevant. I just feel like a lot of people are forgetting about Robbie because he is number 15, or I don't even know if he's still ranked anymore.
I don't even know if he's ranked anymore.
But like Robbie Lawler's an OG. These are two OGs fighting one another, and that's why I just love it so much. It's a good matchup to make, and this type of matchup that they made for Nick leads me to believe that, okay, he's coming back for a good time, not a long time. He's coming back for fun, big fights. He's not coming back to fight the top 5 guys in the world, make a title run. At least I don't think. But I think he's coming home to the UFC to have some really fun fights, entertain his fans, and having him on that pay-per-view card is just going to bump up that buy rate. So I love everything about this card so much. 5 rounds, 3 rounds, 2 rounds, 7 rounds. I don't give a shit. I'm excited for it, and that's all I can say, really. I don't think you're getting overexcited. It's worth the hype. I mean, it was the talk of Twitter for 24 hours straight. So,
yeah, I guess I did see some people that are like, I'm excited about this bout, but I'm trying to keep my expectations in check due to the fact that these are two guys at the end of the day.
Yeah, they're older. They've been through
past their primes.
Yeah.
But it is an interesting thought, though, that for Nick Diaz, if he comes in here and dominates Robbie Lawler, let's say, maybe even stops him again like he did in their first fight, kind of what that would lead for him. What kind of doors would that open for him? Because right now, we assume that, like, these guys are, like you just said, good time, not a long time, right?
Right.
These kind of fights are maybe all that's left for these two. And I think for Robbie, that might be even more for sure, just because we've seen him fighting, top 10 level fighters, and he's just getting beat pretty easily. For Nick Diaz, though, there's a lot of unknown. He's put himself in great shape, but you assume a 7-year layoff, while that might be good to maybe heal up and, your chin and all that, like maybe that's good for that. It can't be great for your It can't be great for your overall game. Yeah. And we assume that, like, he's title shots and stuff like that is out of the question. But if he comes in here and beats the brakes off Robbie Lawler, don't be surprised if he's like one fight away from a title shot, Dom.
Well, and I feel truthfully that inevitably he will face Jorge Masvidal. So that's what I feel like the big plan is in my head.
I feel like if he beats Robbie, especially convincingly,
he could go right into a Masvidal fight.
He go right into a Masvidal fight. And if he beats Jorge Masvidal...
Now, wait a minute. He may unintentionally be fighting for a title after that.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
It sounds crazy, and maybe Robbie will beat him in the first fight, and that'll all be done. But there's a lot we don't know. We just don't know what kind of Nick Diaz we're going to get in his return.
But when you have the name value, that's how it works, man. So
yeah. He's not that far away from title shot.
He's closer than it may appear.
Yeah. So moving on from there, we're going to actually get into the sort of the preview portion of this episode. And we're going to start with Bellator. It's Bellator 262.
262.
Yeah, I didn't write it on here, so I kind of couldn't write. Bellator be pumping these pay-per-views out.
Every event they have is a numbered event. So.
Yeah, so Bellator 262, we're going to talk about the main event for the women's flyweight title.
Good fight.
Juliana Velasquez, the, I guess, newly minted champion, coming off her biggest win over ilima-lei McFarland, who was the long-standing, I think the inaugural women's flyweight champion for Bellator.
Yeah, was the champ for 4 years, I believe. Yep.
So she gets her first title challenger here, and Denise Kielholtz.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what are kind of your thoughts coming in here? What are your biggest questions you want to see answered in this bout?
Well, I got to say, Velasquez to win that belt from ilima-lei was quite impressive for all 5 rounds. I mean, it was super one-sided, and she's undefeated for a reason. We say it a lot. She's 11-0, but 6-0 in Bellator. She doesn't have a ton of finishes, just 5, but she's such a technically sound striker, and I really just feel like over the course of 5 rounds, she's hard to beat. That's the type of style that she has on the feet. Now, I've not really seen Denise fight similar or as much as Velasquez, but I will say she is 6-1 in Bellator. She's on a 4-fight win streak, and she likes to finish fights. So she does bring the power into this one, whereas Velasquez is more of the real technical, precise striker, and that could always lead to a fun fight, could turn it into a brawl. I'd say Denise's best chance would be to really force the pressure here to become the new champion. I am excited for this. It's a good main event fight. And like you said, the Velasquez era, it really could turn into an era. An undefeated fighter here, only 34. I'm excited to see what she can do as champion.
Yeah, what was so obvious to me in that matchup between Velasquez and McFarland was the size difference.
Yeah.
Velasquez looks huge for women's flyweight.
She's big.
And in here with Kielholtz, I think that's still going to be to her advantage that she has that distance. She's very good with her distance control and her striking at range, which could be a problem for Kielholtz. Now, if Denise can close that distance, she is a black belt in judo, so that could get interesting if she can tie up Velasquez, get her to the ground. But if I remember right, I think Velasquez is
she's a black
belt in judo as well.
Yeah.
So this might be just another situation like, not to discredit Denise here, but this might be like Kayla Harrison,
right,
who's a black belt going up against another black belt.
Right.
She just manhandles her because it's just the black belt is all you can get to, but you can still get better.
Yeah.
So I don't give Denise too, like in my head, I really feel like Velasquez is going to make a big statement here, but I don't know. It's an interesting bout. I'd be interested to see how this fight goes if it's more close quartered, if there's a more clinching involved, because we know kind of what Velasquez's strengths lie when the fight's at distance. But if this fight gets close quartered, even if she has that black belt in judo, is she the more technical judo fighter, or is Denise going to be the one that's able to kind of manhandle her and clinch? Yeah, I would be very interested to see how that goes.
I agree. And you pointed out to Velasquez's reach and stuff against ilima-lei and how much bigger she was. She's 3 inches taller than Denise in this one, 1.5 inches reach advantage as well. So the odds point to her favor in terms of a distance striking battle once more. And it's just hard to go against someone like Velasquez when she just dethroned the 4-year reigning champion in Bellator, made it look easy. So I'm not saying Denise can't do it, but what we just saw from Velasquez was very, very impressive.
And if you look at, you have Denise's record pulled up in front of you, don't you?
I do, yes.
She has fought in Bellator since her second professional MMA belt?
Yeah, she's 6-2 overall, 6-1 in Bellator. So there you go.
She literally was given a Bellator contract as an 0-1 fighter.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that speaks to maybe the expectations she's had in this promotion for a long time. And sort of the Bellator has really kind of molded her into the fighter she is. You got to think that if she were to win, that'd be kind of a pat on the back for the promotion. Like, look at what we were able to accomplish with someone who was so inexperienced when they came in here.
Yeah, Bellator does that a lot too. Do you notice? Like, they have a lot of younger or like moving into their prime ages, early 30s, late 20s, that have just molded in Bellator. And like they came in with like 2 or 3 fights. But now, I mean, you look at Patricio Pitbull, AJ McKee, like their whole careers almost essentially have been within Bellator. So they like to build up some of their own people. And Denise is another, example of that. And now here she is ranked 3rd in their rankings, getting a title fight. So
yeah, I mean, dare I say Bellator might do that better than the UFC. I think the UFC chooses a different method. You see that through the Contender Series and the Ultimate Fighter. They tend to let these prospects build themselves up at these other promotions, whether it's like Cage Warriors, whatever. and then once
and then they grab them.
Then they grab them. But Bellator, I think, in order to compete, their mentality is, let's grab them. Let's grab them before anybody's even knows who they are, and maybe they'll end up being the next huge star.
Yeah, I mean, Austin Vanderford, another example of that, an undefeated fighter. Also, one more note, I just got to add it. I said that Denise is on a 4-fight win streak, but just to convince you all a little bit more about how fun this fight could be, all 4 of those in the win streak are via finish. Just saying. It could be fun.
You don't see that a lot in those divisions. And, we did that, and just for Velasquez, that title win, even though it was a great win due to the fact that McFarland was a long-standing champion and whatnot, pretty dull fight. I mean, Velasquez did what she had to do to win, but I didn't see anything from Velasquez that told me that she's necessarily going to be this high-level finisher. She's a very technical fighter, very good fighter, but I don't know if she's ever going to really have that kind of finishing
prowess.
Yes, and that does matter. Obviously, if you can get a fighter out of there in 1 round versus 5, you want to do it.
Exactly.
But I think we're going to transition from there into some more UFC talk because we do have a card this weekend for the UFC.
Yes, sir.
UFC
Vegas 31.
Nice, thank you. And we have a main event here that was not originally supposed to be the main event. This was supposed to be Max Holloway, Yair Rodriguez. Doesn't that hurt?
Oh, wow. I forgot until you just said it.
However, because of that, this card has kind of been hurt pretty hard by the fact that was such a big fight being put on a fight night. Without it, this card is a bit thin. But I'm actually very happy to see this main event.
We love this main event. Yeah.
Islam Makhachev, number 9 ranked, going up against Thiago Moises, who's ranked 14th. We know for Islam Makhachev, we know what's kind of on the line here. This guy is
the protege
of Khabib. He's the next era of the Dagestan fighter. Yeah. The guys look almost perfect outside of his one loss where he got slept. I mean, which happens.
Yes.
Besides that, he's looked basically flawless. The win over Drew Dober was literally
very good win.
It's still in my mentions for performance of the year. Obviously, we still have more time on that, but the guys looked incredible. But all it is now is getting that convincing win against a high-level opponent. Drew Dober was close to that. I mean, high-level opponent, but now you're going up against Thiago Moises, who is a top 15 fighter for sure. Thiago Moises has been on a nice run of his own. A nice win over Bobby Green, who was surging at the time. He just came off a win over Alexander Hernandez.
He's riding 3 in a row.
Yeah, another good prospect. So I like this fight for Makhachev. I think that this is – I will say stylistically, and I don't want to count out Moises. I don't think anybody should because he is he's a very dangerous opponent. However, I think stylistically it's a tough fight for him going up against Makhachev, just based on where their skill sets line. Moises being a jiu-jitsu fighter and he's going up against a wrestler. I know that's I'm diminishing their skill set down to one aspect there. There's more to it than that. Yeah. But when you have this wrestler, Makhachev, who's so talented, such a bear, he smash, as we say.
Yes.
And then you got Moises, who is a very good jiu-jitsu fighter, probably a little bit better stand-up than Makhachev, but not necessarily the kind of stand-up fighter to maybe – I don't necessarily see him doing enough damage on the feet to make it – I don't know. I don't necessarily see that being too much in play here. I could be wrong.
I think Thiago may be the better overall stand-up fighter, but the power still goes to Makhachev. We've seen him sweep guys on the feet before. So, and then on the ground, obviously, you've got the amazing, Sambo-style wrestling versus the jiu-jitsu black belt and Moises. So it is a fun stylistic fight. The problem is anybody who matches up with Islam Makhachev has a very bad stylistic fight at the end of the day. I mean, that's just the type of fighter that he is, the type of fighter that Khabib was. Khabib obviously will be there in the corner, so that's intimidation enough if you're Thiago Moises and you got to look across and see Khabib in the corner. So I do think this is a good fight. They're deserving of the main event. I like that it's 2 prospects number 9, number 14. It's not like they're household names yet, but this is how you can build them. Give them a main event slot on ESPN to put on a show. And I really do think this is a fun fight, man. Islam is 8-1 in the UFC, but he's won 7 straight. Moises 4-2 in the UFC, but he's won 3 straight against good guys such as Bobby Green and Alexander Hernandez. And we saw, as you mentioned, what Makhachev just did to his biggest opponent yet against Drew Dober. 2 guys with a lot to prove here, 2 young guns. I'm excited.
I like what you just said about their win streaks and kind of their overall records. These are 2 guys surging right now. I mean, they're on the biggest runs of their careers.
And they collide.
And for on paper, this feels like it's a showcase for Islam Makhachev is kind of what I was getting at. And that's cool and all. And I think that he should be the favorite. He does likely have an advantage in most aspects here. But Thiago Moises is a dangerous man. He's a guy that's been kind of counted out on this win streak he's been on. I personally thought that Bobby Green, even though it was a very close fight, I remember going into that, I thought Bobby Green was going to get a huge win there.
Well, he was on a huge momentum streak himself.
And then Thiago kind of comes out of nowhere and beats Bobby. And then you have the Alexander Hernandez fight. We all know Hernandez is a guy that's had expectations for a long time. Yeah. So going up against Thiago Moises, who, yes, he beat Bobby Green, but, still a guy that's overall not super, I guess, in that fight, it was like, okay, he's not super high level still. Yeah. He goes in there and beats pretty handedly a good prospect in Alexander Hernandez. So this is definitely a big step up for him, but a dangerous opponent being that he has been counted out kind of every step of the way here. Yeah. And once you have 2 guys that are so good on the ground going at it in different aspects, wrestling versus jiu-jitsu, it can get interesting if you have some guy sprawling and all of a sudden a choke gets applied. It happens,
It's true.
But I think the biggest factor in this fight that's interesting, the biggest, I guess, what if in this fight, the thing I'm most interested to see is if this fight gets to rounds 4 and 5.
I was about to say that. I figured that's what you were going with.
Because this is new territory for both
guys. Exactly.
And for Islam's style, it'll be hard to keep that up for 5
unless you're Habib.
But that's the thing is he really Habib in that aspect too? Right. Is he just going to be able to grind through rounds 4 and 5 without even getting too tired at all?
Yeah.
Or is he going to slow down?
Yeah.
Because I really think
both of them. Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, just final point being that Thiago, I think his style can hold up over 5 rounds much easier than Islam's can.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen both of these guys more often than not in the UFC go 3 rounds, the full 15 minutes, and look good. Not really gas out. I mean, Islam got the finish in round 3 against Dober for what it's worth. And the 3-fight win streak that Moises is on are all via decision. So 15 straight minutes, 3 straight times. So we've seen him hold up for 15, but adding that 10 extra minutes, the championship rounds, the attention around you being in that main event, it's going to come down to how the pacing of those first 3 rounds will be. Because I think both guys will hold up well, but maybe that goes toward Moises' favor because with a style like Makhachev that's so wrestle heavy, if he comes in with the same mindset of just going all in for 3 rounds, then he gets back to the corner. He's like, wait a minute, I still got 10 more rounds to go. Maybe that could favor Moises as it stretches out. I like that point.
You said 10 more minutes. It's not 10 more rounds.
10 more minutes, yes. Sorry,
I just
not 10 more rounds. It's not a 13 round fight.
This ain't boxing, homie.
Yeah. 10 more minutes.
But yeah, it's that's the biggest I think factor in this fight. I mean, Islam or Thiago might end up getting a finish before that.
Yeah.
But I really think this fight's gonna go into those championship rounds, if not the entire 25 minutes.
Yeah.
And if it does, that's really where a lot of these fights, that round 3, it happens time and time again in 5-round fights. That's the round.
That's the deciding factor.
So often in these close 5-round fights, round 3 shows to be the most important, where things start to shift. So it'll be interesting to see how these 2 hold up if it goes that long.
Well
let's get into the co-main event. because
oh boy,
it's a big difference from our main event. Our main event showcasing prospects, guys that are really looking to make statements, as the headline said. Here, we got some OGs, as I call them.
Yeah.
And Marion
Reneau.
The
Belizean brawler.
I keep wanting to call her Marion, just based on the way it's spelled. So thank you I knew you corrected me before we started, so I wanted to make sure. Marion Reneau, who's ranked 12th at bantamweight, going up against the returning Miesha Tate. After 5 years, she has returned. UFC 205 in New York.
Yeah.
The last time that we saw her in a losing effort to Raquel Pennington. Now, the difference here, obviously, we got a couple OGs here. These are girls that have been fighting in the UFC and professionally in MMA, really as women's MMA started to take off.
Yeah, especially for Miesha, man.
Yeah, I mean, Miesha, the biggest rivalry in women's MMA history is probably her and Ronda.
Oh, yeah.
And that dates her immediately.
Yeah.
Because Ronda is so much in that box of like 2013 to 2016. It's like her era.
Yeah. Miesha started professionally in 2007. Crazy.
Yeah. And then for Marion, she's 44 years old.
Yeah, 44 years old, man.
So I love this matchup for a couple reasons. Because we've seen the growth in women's MMA. I started watching at UFC 199. I have seen a huge growth in the women's divisions have gone through leaps and bounds.
Yes.
The amount of technical prowess that a lot of these women have now is just, it's very much on the same level as the men.
Yes.
But for women like Marion Reneau and for Miesha Tate, obviously Marion's still been fighting, but for Miesha, she kind of left right when that new wave, if you want to call it that, started to come in.
I mean, she got put out by Amanda, who essentially led that new wave. So,
And then for Marion, she's been on a 4-fight losing streak.
Yep.
And I think that kind of shows that maybe the game has caught up to her skill set. She hasn't been able to quite adapt with the times, if you will. Maybe due to her age or other factors, but she's just not quite been able to hold up. So I like this matchup because it's really going to be a test for Miesha Tate. Marion Reneau has made it pretty clear this is her last fight. She's retiring.
It's her retirement
So
fight.
even though she's ranked 12th, sure, if Miesha wins, that'll be a great way to kind of catapult her already into potentially a top 10, top 5 matchup next. But really, this is a test for Miesha to see where she's at.
Yep.
If she comes in here and easily beats Marion Reneau, then you might have something with her.
Yeah.
But if she comes in here and either struggles to win or gets beaten, then it's like, okay, it was nice, this whole homecoming thing, but the game's just passed her by.
Right.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's a fair assessment, 100%. And, for Marion, with it being her retirement fight, having her son in her corner for the very first time ever, a fun little tidbit on there too, you got to figure a lot of motivation here because someone that, yes, is ranked 12th, but a lot of people don't really look Marion with much, aura and awe. She once was all the way up the ranks to number 7 before the skid, but still, being that it is her final fight of her career, 44 years old, she's welcoming back one of the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts history. If she goes out here and puts a stop to the comeback of Miesha Tate, that's quite a big deal. And on the flip side, for Miesha, she's coming in with a lot to prove. She's still only 34, which is good for Miesha in terms of having that layout. Yeah, crazy. It's crazy. Still only 34, which is good. She seems to be, at least in the looks of things, in the best physical shape in terms of leanness and such that I've seen. She seems very well mentally prepared. She's talked a lot about that in her YouTube and in her press conferences, how she was never quite all there with her personal life stuff. Don't want to get into that. But nevertheless, being that maybe we didn't get to see the best Miesha that we could have, but still she became champion, does at least add a little bit more excitement to this return for her. And should she come out and make a statement, it is a big deal because similar to how we talked about with Nick Diaz, name power goes a long way. Miesha's been there and done that in this division, been the champion. So, although it's Marion Reneau, 4-fight losing streak, number 12, should she win, I don't doubt for a second she could be fighting like a number 5 in the next fight and potentially be 2 more wins away from fighting Amanda again for the title. So there's heavy implications on both sides. And, don't get it wrong for Marion. Yes, it's her retirement fight. You don't want to go out on a loss. She's going to want to come out and bring it and just do everything, go all out to get one final win. So there are heavy implications, not just for Miesha, but also for Reneau in this one.
Yeah, I mean, if Reneau wins here, I mean that's a great send off because
the swan song.
She's had a good career, but it's been relatively unassuming, or
right.
It's been kind of a blink and you miss it type career. She's obviously climbed up to number 7. She's had good wins, but nothing too memorable. A win over a returning Miesha Tate, that's a great way to send yourself into retirement.
Oh, yeah.
Now, for Miesha, I do think what you said there about her next fight, if she wins it convincingly, I do think that's an interesting thing to touch on because this women's bantamweight division, and there's no question it's been in such a stagnant place.
Yeah, it's such a perfect time for her to return. It really is.
So it's been very stagnant for a while, and I'm sure that's calculated.
Yeah.
That it's like, okay, this division it's a good time to come in when a lot of these contenders are either unimpressive or
have already lost to Amanda or something.
So for Miesha, I don't think she's going to have any trouble finding opponents if she wins this,
100%.
even if she wins it convincingly, because she's a huge name who a lot of these women at the top of the heap are trying to prove that they should be next for Amanda, but they need a big win to kind of catapult them into, because we know Amanda's not really quite able to carry a pay-per-view on her shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that's due to her. Some of it's due to the fact that none of her opponents are really,
tickle the fans fancy.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure if her and Cyborg had main evented, or if her and I'm trying to think of, I was going to say her and Durandamy, but I don't know if that one would have done too much better. Basically, my point is that these fights where you at least somewhat believed that Amanda could lose, I think they would sell better than what you're getting when it's like,
right.
A lot of people, I don't want to get into Darren Rovell and how he doesn't know shit about fighting, but it's became this annoying topic of her inability to sell.
Whatever happened to appreciating greatness?
Yeah, it's just whatever, man. It's not her fault that.
Yeah.
Whatever.
She's levels above.
Whatever. It's Miesha Tate that I'm talking about.
You're getting hot. Hold on.
So I don't think she's gonna have trouble finding opponents after this fight because, for one, these women want a big name on their resume to push themselves into a title fight with Amanda. But two, a lot of these women are probably going to still think she's very beatable, despite her big name. She's still, even with the win over Reneau, even if it's impressive, that's still going to be in the back of our minds. Like, okay, Marion, though, 4-fight losing streak, 44 years old.
Yeah.
Maybe she's good enough to hang with the top 15, but is she really much better than that? That would be the question in my mind moving off this fight. So we'll just have to see how it kind of goes. I think this will be a very interesting talking point on Monday's episode once we see how the fight actually goes.
Yeah,
and then it's like
next?
We'll have some clear directions for what's next for him.
Right.
Let's get into the rest of this card because there's only a couple fights. We got a couple fights we want to talk about. Let's start with our featured bout.
We love these featured bouts. Yeah.
Jeremy Stephens is back.
This is a violent fight here.
Jeremy Stephens, man, love him or hate him, and I think more people are starting to hate him after his incident with Drakkar Klose, which, come on, man.
It was wrong.
What are you doing? It's stupid.
He's always in fun fights, is where you were going.
Yes. But I'm still a Jeremy Stephens fan because the guy's always in fun fights. Yeah, I get it. He's got the most losses in UFC history.
Right.
He has more losses than wins, actually. But there's a reason that guy is a high level.
He fights killers every fight.
I don't know if he's even ranked at this point just because of, I don't know. I know he was not too long ago, but he might not be anymore. Regardless, Jeremy Stephens is a tough test for anybody.
Yeah.
Yes, I know he's on like a 4-fight losing streak or a 5-fight.
4 out of 5 or something.
Yeah, he had a no contest with Yair Rodriguez. Yeah. But if you go through those fights, I mean, his fight with Zabit, that was a close fight. A fight where he really came on strong against Zabit. Yair Rodriguez, that was a fight of the night. Yeah. Yair clearly won, but Jeremy was never out of that bout. Calvin Kattar elbowed that man to death. Yes. But Jeremy was still in that fight up until the point where he gets beat. So my point is that Jeremy Stephens is a tough test for anybody. Obviously, at this point, that guy's never going to fight for a title. He's really still in the UFC because he puts on really fun fights. Right. And he's a good test for a lot of these young up-and-comers at this point. Yes. And that's going to be the case here. He's going up against – I'm going to take a guess that this name is pronounced Matos Garbrandt. Now, Garbrandt is only 1-1 in the UFC, coming off a big knockout win over Scott Holtzman.
Yeah.
But 18-1 overall. So his first fight in UFC was his first loss of his professional career, but he's been able to bounce back. The guy has some really high expectations.
Yeah.
So I think that matters here, but this is a huge jump up.
It's a big test.
Going up against Jeremy Stephens, man.
Because Jeremy's just so tough.
And I don't know what the odds are going to say on this one. Maybe Gamrot's going to be the favorite due to his record and, kind of the expectations. But, man, if you're a bet man, and I'm not giving betting advice, I want to make that clear. But Jeremy Stephens has got to be, like, if he's an underdog,
yeah,
you might, if you have some money to spare, you might throw it on a guy like that who really, I mean, this is 1-1 in your UFC career.
And you're already fighting Stephens.
Jeremy Stephens?
Yeah.
I know that you were 17-0 outside the UFC, but and yes, I know that a big thing that we talk about on this podcast is undefeated for a reason, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it's not the UFC.
Yeah.
You went 17-0 outside the promotion. You're 1-1 here. And now you're going up against Jeremy Stephens. That's tough.
I don't want to blast you on the spot here, but do you happen to know the UFC loss that Garbrandt had? Because I'm totally blanking.
While you talk about your thoughts on the fight, I'll look it up.
Fair enough. This is going to be violence. This is potential fight of the night territory here with this one. Stephens still carries the power regardless. Like Noah was saying how he's on the losing streak, the skid, but he's always going to be in the fight. So a guy like Garbrandt, I feel like you have to put Stephens out in this fight. Because if you're letting him hang around with the opportunity to land the shot, he could very well do that against a younger guy that's still newer to the UFC. I will say, and we kind of talked about this last week. I forget which fighter it was. It was Ilia Topuria. This fight kind of reminds me of his matchup with Ryan Hall, where the UFC probably just believes so much in a high ceiling for Garbrandt that although it's only his third UFC fight, they're putting him in a featured bout on a main card of a fight night against a prominent name in Jeremy Stephens. Yes, he doesn't have a ranking, but should he come in and beat Jeremy, he's probably going to fight a ranked guy next. So I think it says a lot about what the ceiling could be, what the UFC believes in Garbrandt to be with his skill set. So I think it is a very fun fight. It's a perfect test for Garbrandt early on in his UFC career, and should he fail, it could just be right back to the drawing board because it is a guy like Jeremy Stephens. So I really do like this matchup for multiple reasons. And should Stephens lose, he finds himself in a really, really poor spot. But I don't want to talk too much on that until Monday because you never know. He could come out and put away the new guy. So
the one loss for Garbrandt in UFC was a split decision loss on the Ortega Korean Zombie card, and it was against Guram Kutaladze.
Okay.
Who's 12-2 and is undefeated in the UFC. So definitely, like, for all we know, that Guram is going to end up being a big deal at some point, and then that loss isn't going to look too bad.
Well, then he even went on to fight a bigger name, though, after the loss.
Yeah, I mean, Scott Holtzman is at least a guy that's more experienced, if you will. A guy who's been around the UFC for a while. I think, for me, the question here, because we know if Jeremy Stephens is winning this fight, I know how it's going to go. It's going to be a kind of rock'em sock'ems type style fight where both guys land some really good shots, but Jeremy just that that kind of
one
killer,
nasty one. Laying.
just the power and really that mindset that he's always got, that killer be killed type thing, is able to put him away. I'm very interested to see if Garbrandt comes in here and wins. How does he do it? Is he aggressive? Is he more at distance, more of a control style? I'll be interested to see how he sort of treats an opponent. How does he treat an opponent like Jeremy Stephens? Because Jeremy is very much good everywhere. He's really a tough, great leg kicks, by the way. Got to watch out for those. That guy's got some nasty leg kicks. And that's just my biggest question is for Matos Garbrandt in this fight. Where do we see him take this fight in order to get a win, if that's what ends up happening? Does he come right at Jeremy Stephens and look to put him away early? That would be impressive. Or does he keep him at distance, control the outside, pick his shots, kind of
might not be a bad idea even to try and grapple.
And then you have the idea of grappling. Not that either of those are bad ways to win. It's just more – it'll just be worth noting, and based off of that, be worth kind of maybe estimating where he's at, based on – I mean, style adds – there's style points in the UFC. Don't get it twisted. An early knockout might get this guy into the top 15 a lot quicker than a boring decision win. You know what I mean?
Against a guy like Stephens, you kind of just have to pick, do I want to get into a firefight or do I want to play this intelligently? That's kind of what it comes down to against Jeremy.
And now we got our last fight here. This is also on the main card. And Dominic, I know this is the fight that you were specifically asking for, so I'm going to let you speak about it first. It's Gabriel Benitez going up against Billy Quarantillo.
This is a big test for Billy Q here, coming off of that loss he had to Gavin Tucker, simply because Benitez has so much experience. I mean, he's got 30 fights. He's got 10 fights in the UFC. It's a guy that loves to finish. I mean, he's finished 18 out of his 22 wins. He's still only 33, which is crazy. And Billy Q has also finished a lot of his fights, 11 out of 15. And I think it's a really fun stylistic fight because Billy Q is a guy that we love on this show. We love some Billy Q on here. And I think he has good potential. He's a Contender Series guy, and you know how we feel about them. So the UFC believes in these people, and he is 3-1 in the UFC. And granted, that only loss is to an undefeated, or once undefeated, I should say, Gavin Tucker. But for Benitez, this is a guy that's always in violent wars. And if he brings the fight to Billy, we saw how when Gavin brought it to him, he was just kind of wilted under the pressure that Gavin brought toward him. It was a lot of grappling in there too, but even the striking was very aggressive on Gavin's part. So if Benitez comes out fast and furious with the hands, Billy's going to have to adapt very quickly, or it could be a quick night out for him because this is a very experienced vet. But should Billy win and adapt and make the proper changes, come in with the right game plan, it is a big win and a good step in the right direction coming off of a loss.
Yeah, I love Billy Q. We've talked about that multiple times. We've definitely been a big fan of his since he kind of made a splash in the UFC. But the wording of this might sound a little harsh. It's just the only word that's coming to mind. But I don't want it to – I'll try to explain a little more because I don't want it to sound as bad as it's going to. Billy Q kind of got exposed by Gavin Tucker. And when I say that, I don't mean like that Billy's not as good as we thought he was, or that he can't bounce back and come back. I just mean I think that there was a pretty big hole in Billy's game that just had kind of gone amiss in most of his fights. And then against Gavin Tucker, it was just heightened. It was very obvious what that hole was. And that was just that Billy Q could not avoid the clinch and could not keep that fight at a distance at his range. It was so disappointing.
He couldn't control the pace.
It was disappointing because even though Gavin Tucker's a great opponent, I mean, a guy, very tough guy, and arguably should have been the favorite going into that fight. It was a big step up for Billy.
Yeah. But
for that to just be the game plan, the over and over and over, just clinch up. And I mean, Billy just was very uncomfortable with it.
Yes.
He didn't react very well to when he was put in those positions that are very common in MMA. So that's kind of what I need to see more here is as he's still growing and improving, he's still a prospect, even though he's 32, I want to say.
32, 33. I have it, actually.
So for him, he's still in his prime, but he's at the tail end of his prime typically.
Yeah, 32. 32.
So typically for an MMA fighter, I look at the prime as like 28 to 32 range. And obviously that can extend a couple of years or be lessened a couple of years depending. But I feel confident for Billy that this is sort of the tail end of his prime. So he doesn't, even though he needs to keep improving and stay active and take fights. How much more time before, how many more fights before I'm like, okay, this is just as good as he's going to get.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're getting closer to maybe we want to believe. At that. And I still think I'm hoping that we'll see quite a big improvement in this performance. But a guy like Benitez, who is also a very experienced veteran, guy who's fought the UFC for a long time, doesn't have the cleanest of records, but he's fought good opponents here and there. And like you said, is always kind of looking to take your head off, put on an exciting fight. It'll be interesting to see how Billy kind of adapts to those elements because Benitez is no guy to be – he's not a guy looking to be a stepping stone or whatever you want to call it.
I like that fight's getting a little main card shine too.
I think there's a good chance we're looking at a fight of the night type.
Yeah, I agree
with that one. But that's going to wrap it up here for our MMA Weekend Preview. Let us know your thoughts on these fights. And after they happen, let us know what you thought about them, and we'll put it on Monday's episode. You can leave us a voice message on our link tree, which is in both of our social media bios. You can see the link tree, and there's a link there to the Anchor page for leaving a voice message. But we'll plug all that now, but just figured I'd get out in front on that one. But Monday, we will have our recap of the whole weekend. All these fights we talked about, we'll give our thoughts on kind of how they went. Anything else that kind of happens, any big finishes or just big things that happen in these fights that for Bellator or for the UFC. Even if we didn't talk about the fight here, we'll talk about it there. And any news that comes out, obviously, it will be a 3-episode week. So Wednesday we will be back with another special episode.
Mm-hmm.
But until then, Dominic, tell the good people where they can find you on social media.
You can find me on Twitter, on Instagram, at Juiceley14. More importantly, find the podcast on Twitter, on Instagram, at BAJ_MMA podcast.
Yep. And for me, if you go to Instagram or Twitter, I am at ntbaker_. There's a link in my bio on both of those to the link tree, which gives you the links to all the platforms the podcast is on, along with social media platforms. So that includes the Below Average Joe's Instagram and Twitter, Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcast, and our Anchor page. Leaving a voice message link is on there. And if you want to become a supporter of the podcast, that is on there as well. So be sure to check those out. Thank you to Anchor for sponsoring today's episode.
Of course.
But that is it. We're out. We're going to see y'all on Monday.